All right, guys, welcome to today's lecture. So we're talking about U.S. neutrality in World War II. Now they went from a neutral country to a belligerent power in World War II. So here's our table of contents. So we're going to start off with the prelude for World War One, and the ending of World War One really just pushes Europe into World War II. So they directly affect each other. So you could read the rest of the points here, but we're pretty much going to get right into it, so I'm not going to go over it. And then we're going to end with the USSR invasion and Atlantic Charter. So that pretty much is when the U.S. is fully committed to joining the war on the Ally side. So, background info. So this is how the ending of World War II helped start, or ending of World War I helped us start World War II. So here's a little video.
World War I leads to World War II as day follows night. By the end of World War I, everybody is looking to get advantage.
World War I didn't really end in 1918. It brutalized an entire generation of Europeans. It brutalized an entire generation of people around the world. And it made them realize that war on this scale was not only possible, but actually thinkable.
There's a wonderful, wonderful political cartoon where the fat politicians and generals are walking out of Versailles, and there's a little tiny boy and he's crying in the corner. And I'm not kidding, he says, "I'm cannon fodder for 1940. They knew, anyone with half a brain knew that the Treaty of Versailles was essentially the starting gun for the Second World War.
Essentially what happened is that you create such an unstable economy and so much animosity between nations that you're just seeding the field of war to rise and grow again.
A lot of the anger, animosity, resentment that fuels the rise of the National Socialists of Adolf Hitler in Germany can be directly tied to that. It would be difficult to argue that that's simply propaganda that's utilized by Adolf Hitler. These were very difficult terms for the German people to handle. And it creates this bunker mentality, this us against the world mentality that ultimately will play out in Hitler being able to create a program that appeals to that sentiment.
To the average German, they have been sold out by the politicians.
In particular, it made people like Adolf Hitler, who had fought, after all, in the German army in World War I, think that if only the Germans could do it again, but do it right this time, they could actually win.
We call it World War I, World War II, but it's really two different stages of one global conflict. Just happens that people put their arms down for a 20-year period, and then they went back to fighting again.
But here are pretty much the key points here. The Treaty of Versailles was the treaty that ended World War I. So Germany took sole responsibility for the war. There was harsh, unrealistic reparations. They lost almost all of their military, and Germany lost territory and colonies. So Germany took sole responsibility for the war, and a lot of Germans were embarrassed and resentful because they lost and because of all these other things that happened. So they had harsh, unrealistic reparations. So that meant they paid for all the damages in World War I. So millions and millions of gold marks, which crippled the economy of Germany. So it made a lot of people unhappy. They lost almost all their military, so they were only allowed to have 100,000 soldiers, 6 battleships, and no air force. But you're like, oh, 100,000 soldiers? That's a lot, right? Well, when you compare it to France, which shares a border with Germany, or the United Kingdom, or the USSR, that is a puny, puny force. So that wasn't good, and Germany lost territory and colonies. So colonies wasn't good because there was no economic output from those colonies, so that crippled the economy even more, and they lost territory. So if there were Germans in, let's say, France or Austria or Poland, people and they were angry. They wanted all of the German people, all the German-speaking people under one roof. So this made, Germans even more angry. So here's a little video from World War I veterans, and you can see by the videos they are clearly shell-shocked and physically and mentally hurt. So this could just show that World War I is a terrible war. So on the left here, this is actually just like a drawing. This is Uncle Sam, right? He's just dredged up in European politics. And this is what a lot of United States citizens were afraid of. They didn't want to be just caught up in all this. So he's actually carrying this umbrella right here that is titled the Monroe Doctrine, right? So the Monroe Doctrine, if you remember, was by President Monroe a while ago, and he pretty much said, Europeans, you guys stay over in Europe. Don't cross the Atlantic over to here to the Americas. We got this. Don't come over here, right? And a lot of people agreed with this. They did not want to be. They didn't want Europeans over there or over here, and Americans should not go over there and get all tangled up in this. So, first is the Neutrality Acts of 1935 to 1937. So Congress legislates neutrality. So this is before the war, right? 4 years before the war, and it pretty much said two things. No American could sail on a belligerent ship, which is a nation at war, and outlawed arms or weapons sales or loans to nations at war. So both these are seen as causes from U.S. involvement in World War I. So if you look at the Lusitania, Americans were on the British ship, and then that pulled America into the war. Also this one, because a lot of United States entrepreneurs, they were loaning out a bunch of money to the countries in World War I, and they wanted that money back. So both of these really pulled America into the war, into the First World War, so they did not want this to happen again, right? So this this can be seen before the war even happens. They knew something was coming. World War II starts. The Axis versus the Allies.
With unmatched ferocity, Hitler's war machine has launched its blitzkrieg against Western Europe, pushing it to the brink. As we brace for our darkest hour, we must summon our strength to be the bulwark against oppression. The Nazi onslaught will be the greatest test we'll ever face. But with our allies, face it and defeat it we must.
So, the major allies of World War II, the United Kingdom and France, they were there the whole time. The United States and the Soviet Union joined later in the war. Major Axis powers, Germany, Italy, and Japan. We won't be talking about Japan today, we'll be covering that soon. World War II key figures, Adolf Hitler, the leader of Germany, Mussolini, Italy, General Tojo, this is a Japanese leader, so we won't be talking about him today. Winston Churchill, he's the leader of the UK. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, he is the American president at the time for most of it until he dies, and then Harry Truman takes over. So the total number of casualties is 60 to 85 million. That's a lot of people. And it wasn't even military casualties. Most of this was civilian casualties that got caught up in the war. So it starts in 1939, ends in 1945. That's 6 years. That's a long time. So cash and carry. So World War II starts, and this was a way for the U.S. to help without being sucked into the war. So FDR creates the cash and carry system to get around the Neutrality Acts. The Allies could purchase weapons from the U.S. if they pay for them in cash and carried them in their own ships. So, right, only the Allies could do this, and this was a way for the U.S. and FDR could help the Allies win the war because they would come to the U.S., they would buy the weapons or supplies and carry them back in their own ships. Right, so here's a way to sell it. So help the Allies now to win, right? So our men will never be necessary, cash and carry. So this was sort of represented a lot of U.S. views at the time. They wanted the Allies to win, right? They didn't want the aggressors to really win here, but they didn't want to get directly involved. So just cash and carry. Send the stuff, and we don't need to do it. Selective Service Act of 1940. So this is the first peacetime draft in U.S. history, and we will be talking about that in a second, but these are going on at the same time. The Selective Service Act we'll get to in the next slide, but the Battle of Britain. This occurs July 10th to October 31st, 1940. And Britain is left to face Germany alone as everyone in Europe is conquered or neutral. So Germany steamrolls pretty much all of Europe using blitzkrieg tactics. So that's called lightning war, pretty much. That's just rolling in with tanks and planes and ground troops and just going all at once really fast. And this pretty much just conquers all of Europe, Poland, France, Hungary, etc. All of them. So after everyone in Europe is gone, Hitler plans to invade Britain. So the Battle of Britain is pretty much just a bunch of bombing of London and other cities, and the Blitz is referred to as 57 days and nights straight. So imagine just you can't even go to bed at night because you're just getting bombed, you know what I mean? But right down here, there's actually a picture, and you could see how terrible it was. It was leveling buildings. And there we go. Okay. Nope. Why are we doing this? Okay. Selective Service Act, September 1940. So this was going on at the same time as the Battle of Britain and the Blitz. FDR signs the Selective Service Act. So all men between the ages of 21 and 35 needed to register. So there was a sense we needed to get ready for war, but we also wanted to stay out of it. So we were just getting ready at this point, and we didn't want to intervene. But we are getting ready because it is a big possibility we will probably be up in the war. U.S. and U.K. destroyers for bases. So Britain needs greater assistance because we just talked about this. They're the only ones against Germany, so they need more help, right? Without Congress's approval, the U.S. transfers 50 serviceable destroyers to Britain in exchange for a few military bases in the Caribbean for 99 years. So the U.S. and the Allies sort of get something from this. So we lose 50 battleships, right? But they're not the most and the best of the best, right? But we do get 8 bases in the Caribbean, and the United Kingdom doesn't need these bases right now in the Caribbean. They got their hands full in Europe right now. So it's really a win-win situation for both of us. But like you could sort of see already with all the past things, and now they're only really helping the Allies. So are they really neutral? These are just questions here to ask. So we just talked about cash carry system, and here are some problems with it, right? German U-boats make the Atlantic extremely dangerous, and England had no money, right? The Allies don't have the time, the money, the resources, safety to travel to the U.S., right? As we can see on the map here, right? These green lines, these are the radar systems between the United Kingdom and the United States and Canada. So anything within these green lines closer to the countries, right? These we could see here. We could see the U-boats and the boats, perhaps. So, but right here in the middle, this is a problem, right? So between the two countries, this is a real big problem because over here, there's no radar. So U-boats are just sinking ships left and right. So it's not really safe. It's a big problem for cash carry. So here's a few solutions. So one solution is get rid of the cash part, right? Lend-Lease Act of March 1941. So the U.S. can lend weapons, and we don't need the cash back right now. We'll lend them, we'll get it back later. So this is pretty much an economic declaration of war for the U.S. And a slogan here is send guns, not sons, right? Send the planes, send the tanks, send the munitions, right? Don't send our sons over there yet. We don't want to do that. They could take care of it. So here's an analogy by FDR, and you could read it and pause it if you want, but the main thing here is he pretty much uses your neighbor, his house is on fire, right? Just give him a hose, right? You don't expect payment right now. He'll come back and give the hose back, or he'll pay for the hose later. It's pretty much the same thing. This pretty much makes the U.S. The great arsenal of democracy. So next is the U.S. Allied Convoy Systems. This is another solution to the cash carry problems. So the U.S. will escort British ships back to the U.K. So if submarines are caught, they are shot on sight. So this is a big solution because U.S. planes, U.S. ships, they will stay with the British ships, and they will get more munitions back to the UK. So as time goes on, U.S. are more and more involved because of the fear the Axis powers are going to win. So this is going to be our last 2 points here, is Operation Barbarossa and the Atlantic Charter. So Operation Barbarossa is the invasion of Russia. So after Germany failed to invade the UK through the Battle of Britain, right, they actually won that on top. They did not get invaded. He turns his attention east and invades Russia. This is a big mistake because now Stalin is in bed with the Allies. This allows supplies from the US to the USSR. So he turned his attention east because of this term right here called Lebensraum. This translates in English called living space. So this is the same thing as German Manifest Destiny. So US Manifest Destiny, we're looking from the 13 colonies, and we're going sea to sea. We're going from 13 colonies all the way up to California. This is the same thing. They want living space. They want more room. They want it eastward into Russia. So this is a lot of Germans want this. They've always wanted this. It's not a new thing. So that's why he turns his attention east and invades Russia. So, but this is a bad thing because now Stalin is with the Allies. The USSR is now an ally, and they can get supplies from the US. And the last thing is the Atlantic Charter. In August of 1941, Roosevelt and Churchill meet about post-war goals. So before Roosevelt joins the war, they talk about these things. These are eerily similar to World War I's Wilson's 14 points. So one of them is no territorial gains. All peoples had a right to self-determination. Trade barriers were to be lowered, and freedom from want and fear. Freedom of the seas, disarmament of aggressor nations, and new collective security organizations. So the self-determination, this is a big one, is so the people like Hungary or Poland, for example, they should be able to self-determine who they want to be their leader, right? They should be able to determine if they want a democracy or who they want to lead them. And a new collective security organization, right? So they just had the League of Nations and it fell apart. They should get a better one, a newer one. It should be the United Nations, which we still have today, to stop future wars from happening. So now Roosevelt is fully committed to stopping the Axis advancement. So not only is FDR committed to stopping the Axis, but also joining the Allies. From the beginning of this, the U.S. was neutral, but as time went on, they walked the line of neutrality. A question I would ask you is, was the U.S. really neutral before entering the war? And next time, we will talk about this more in detail and about the Pacific Theater. Thank you all, and have a good day.